Welcome to a discussion on Lesson 13.3, The Renaissance Spreads. So as you already know, the Renaissance began in Italy, but it quickly did spread to other countries throughout Europe, to France, to Germany, to Spain, to England, and so on. And there are many reasons why there was a rapid movement of the Renaissance period and why it did spread to these other countries. And so the northern countries saw a growth of cities and trade. Okay, remember in England and France, they were in conflict known as the 100 Years' War. That is now ended. And now we kind of have this peace and stability between countries. This led to the growth of cities, which then led to the growth of trade. The growth of cities led to a creation of a wealthy merchant class. And remember, merchants are those who are trading. That's their business, to trade products. So there was a new wealthy merchant class throughout Europe. And these people were sponsors to artists and writers. They were the patrons. They were the ones supplying the money to these Renaissance artists. And also in France and England and Germany and Spain, they were unified countries. Remember, Italy is a bunch of city-states. England and France are unified countries ruled by a powerful monarch. And remember, a monarch is a king or queen. So at this time, it could be either one of them. And so these monarchs also, not only did they create stability within their own country, but they promoted and supported the arts. They saw them as a source of pride for their country, that this art came from my country, or this play came from my country, or this, whatever it was a source of pride. It came from my country. And also there was cultural interaction. In Italy, during the Renaissance period, there was conflict. There was war. And so those Italian artists moved to other European countries to live to avoid the conflict. And when they moved, they shared their ideas. Also, you had northern artists travel to Italy to learn from those Renaissance artists. So there was this constant trading of ideas and interaction. So let's talk about three of the men from the Renaissance period, or what they call the Northern Renaissance period, that you need to know. So the first one is Albrecht Dürer. He was a German artist. He had a special artistic style. He blended the Italian Renaissance style with the medieval German traditions and kind of created this own unique style. He was also very skilled in showing perspective and fine detail in his art. He is most famous for woodcuts, and woodcuts is a printed image produced from a wood carving. So what he would do is he would carve an image or engrave an image into a piece of wood, and then he would place ink on the surface of the piece of wood, and then the image would be printed on a piece of paper, kind of like a stamp. So if you look at the art work on this screen of Jesus during his crucifixion, that is a woodcut. It was carved into a piece of wood, ink was placed on top, and it was printed on a piece of paper. You can see the fine detail and the perspective that he put into his art. So woodcuts. Now his most famous work is known as the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And this is a biblical theme. It portrays death, plague, war, and famine. And these are the things that will appear at the end of time, at the end of days. So if you look at the actual artwork, you can see the detail in it. You can see the biblical imagery within it. You can see the theme of death and plague and famine and war and how it looks like chaos. So that is his best, and that is a woodcut as well. So another famous artist of the Northern Renaissance that you should already know from Sister Obla's is William Shakespeare. He was an England playwright. He wrote comedies, tragedies, and historic plays. In his work, he focused on the human nature. So things like loyalty, family, friendship, justice were oftentimes themes to his plays. Some of his most famous works: A Midsummer Night's Dream, Romeo and Juliet, and Hamlet. William Shakespeare also wrote poems known as sonnets. So he wrote sonnets, he wrote plays. He was also a great businessman. And he worked with some other of his friends to create the global theater in England. We will discuss William Shakespeare more tomorrow as we focus on his work and the Globe Theater. And the last person that you need to know is Johannes Gutenberg. He was a German inventor. His claim to fame, his one invention that really changed the course of history, not only the Renaissance, but history, was the printing press. It was a machine for pressing paper against inked, movable type. And you guys had a worksheet on this on Friday as well, the printing press. But what civilization had actual printing before Gutenberg's invention? If you said China, you would be correct. But Gutenberg improved upon what the Chinese were doing and made it available in Europe. So he first used his machine to print a complete version of the Bible in 1455. So what was the impact of the actual printing press? Well, there's a large impact. So before the printing press, all books were handwritten by scribes, and it took many months to create copies of books, especially the Bible. Think about how large it is to handwrite. Now we move to after the printing press. And hundreds of copies of books could be made quickly. They were cheap to make, so many people could buy. Not only the wealthy could buy books now, but the lower classes could as well. They were cheap. They could be produced quicker and cheaper. And since there was more books and they were cheaper to buy, it encouraged people to learn and to learn how to read. Now that these books were available to them, it gave them motivation to learn how to actually read. And since books could move quickly, and everybody had the capability of buying them, it helped to spread the new ideas of the Renaissance. So the printing press really lit a fire underneath the Renaissance period and these new ideas. And one of the major, and there's a couple of major key ideas that came from the invention of the printing press. One of them we'll talk about later on, which is the scientific revolution. These new ideas of science that could be spread out more quickly with the printing press. But we also had, and we'll talk about this before I move on to that. Also, the printing press, there was something called vernacular. And now the printing press, now books could be written in people's native language. So they did not have to learn Latin. Now they can read it in English or French or Spanish or German. Now let's go what I was talking about. So not only did the printing press kind of help spark the scientific revolution throughout Europe, but the printing press really sparked a movement that we'll talk about next week called the Reformation. And that is kind of a new look at the church and religion. But because the printing press could print the Bible more quickly and cheaper, and people were more motivated to learn to read, people could now read the Bible for themselves and draw their own conclusions about religious teachings. And they start to see that some of the things that the Catholic Church did, some of their practices, some of their teachings, were not directly aligned with the Bible. And so this was a major impact of the printing press. The printing press, so in fact, more books were printed in the first 50 years of the printing press than were written by hand in the entire history of mankind up to 1450. Can you believe that? It took 50 years to produce the same amount of books than the rest of human history before 1450. Unbelievable impact of the printing press.